Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is a dear friend, Vanessa Lillie. Vanessa is the author of the Rhode Island set best-selling thrillers Little Voices and For the Best, and the creator of the Audible original co-authored best-selling series Young Rich Widows, which was an International Thriller Writers' Best Audiobook nominee, with a sequel, Desperate Deadly Widows, forthcoming in April. Her latest book, Blood Sisters, featuring a Cherokee archaeologist, launches on Halloween 2023. Vanessa has a weekly column in the Providence Journal about life during the pandemic and hosts an Instagram live show chatting with authors the night before their book launch. Vanessa is an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, living on Narragansett land in Rhode Island with her husband, third grade son, and bossy Pugapoo.
Yeah, she's
Say
actually
hi.
right here.
You got
She's saying hi.
there she is. She's so sweet. I know we have a dog fest here because
Yeah.
Georgie is right over there, and Teddy's
Look at the babies. Oh, two babies.
two babies.
The doggy voice comes out. Look at the babies.
I know the little kid voice. So anyway, so Blood Sisters. I love this book. I've read it. I got to read it as she was writing it, and then I just got to devour the finished copy, which I thought it was amazing before, but it is so phenomenal. So please, Vanessa, tell our listeners about Blood Sisters.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your support, especially the early support when you don't quite even know what you're writing. So Blood Sisters is a story of Sid Walker, and she is a Cherokee woman from northeastern Oklahoma, which is just like me. And but she's an archaeologist for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And one day, one of her old name badges is found in some remains near a crime scene she barely escaped as a girl, and that calls her home. And while she's there, she finds out her sister has gone missing. And so she is not only looking into these remains and possible ties to an old case, but she's looking for her sister, who has a drug problem history. And there's some other issues around family, as well as community. So for me, it was just an opportunity to write about the place that I'm from. I haven't lived there since I was 18 and I went away to college, but my family is still there. And, it's obviously a place I love and wanted to write about. And there's just a lot of women, girls who go missing and murdered, which I was so grateful to be able to write about that and elevate that in whatever way I can. But also the land itself. There's a real kind of environmental and social justice piece around the land in this book. So I was actually really happy to be able to look into that and write about that too.
Yeah, so I mean, talk about the seed for the story. You've been, I remember when you sort of started to think about wanting to do a story about a Cherokee woman, and you were sort of also really wanting to get people to understand about these missing, women and girls from reservations, which is really actually something that has been happening forever, but it feels like we're finally sort of paying attention to this in a real way, which I appreciate, obviously. But can you sort of go back to where it started, where Sid started, besides sort of your home, Miami? I'd say
That's
it for me.
Nailed it.
It, it's
Miami.
spelled like Miami, but it's Miami, Oklahoma. So do you remember sort of where that idea started?
So I think for me, my creative brain is a crock pot. And so I kind of put things in there that I want to eventually figure out where the story is. And so I knew I wanted to write about being Cherokee because it is a part of me, but I'm also white presenting. And so, it's a part of me that I wanted to make sure I took the time to really reflect in the right way and to create a character who was really in my lane of experience. And So when I sat down and kind of thought about Sid Walker, I had also hoped that if I was able to explore this story from like a Cherokee lens, that I wanted to be able to kind of lift up the missing and murdered crisis, but there's many issues within Indigenous communities outside of even the Cherokee tribes, or like the Quapaw tribe that's in this book as well, that I wanted to kind of continue to like learn about and to share. So the hope was I'd create a character I could kind of follow along through
Mhm.
different experiences, and I'm learning and sharing kind of it's her journey as well. But I knew I needed to start in my experience. And honestly, I kind of wanted to just understand it more. I mean, it's when you grow up in a place, in some ways you know it, and then in some ways you don't, because you see. And so I wanted to go back and look at it as where I'm from as an adult
Right,
and research it as a writer and think
right.
about it creatively versus, and just to go a little bit into the history of the place, northeastern Oklahoma, and the town in particular in Blood Sisters is Pitcher, Oklahoma. And Pitcher, Oklahoma, in for about 60 years, starting around the 1900s, became a boom town because lead and zinc minerals were found in it. And that land at the time was Quapaw tribal land after they had been removed from kind of the Arkansas area, like their own Trail of Tears. I mean, people know of the Trail of Tears for the Cherokee, but most tribes have a Trail of Tears. And so for the
Yeah,
Quapaw, it removed them there. And so there's this piece of land, all of a sudden they find minerals in it. And it goes from a few thousand people to eventually over 20,000 people in this little tiny place, because there were all of these mining companies that came in and had just carte blanche to really just do whatever they wanted to the town. And so it became $1 billion endeavor. It ended up providing over half the bullets for both world wars. It was the largest kind of deposit of these minerals in the world. And then in like the 60s ish, it kind of went bust. And that meant all of the companies had pulled out. And so all of and what it took to pull these minerals out was they essentially dug giant caverns and tunnels under the land. And so once they pulled out of there, it filled up with water and became what the EPA would call the most toxic place in America. And so it was just completely devastating to the community that continued to live there. And so
right.
Blood is set in 2008. And in 2008, there were still people there. In fact, there was a federal home buyout program at the point of Blood Sisters. And I said it there very intentionally because there's also a couple other really big things that happened on one weekend in particular. And so, the history of the place, and going back to my point, of course I knew about Pitcher. In fact, something very unique about the place is, if you like Google pictures of it, they have what's called chat piles. And these are like little pieces of gravel. And there's these giant, almost mountainous hills full of this poison rock, and it's all over Pitcher. It almost looks like the surface of the moon, or like
Mhm.
suddenly these hills and mountains had sprung up, on this flat land. But as a child, like we would play on those, like I know Pitcher, and I know that you don't drink the water when you go there, and I know that the kids got called names who lived there, and it's a town with a history. But to go back as an adult and really learn about what had happened to the people who were there, to the people who resisted leaving, to the Quapaw tribe itself, which only very recently started getting some money back from the literally billions of dollars that
Yeah,
were taken from there. Was I was just ready as a writer to kind of
yeah.
into that.
I mean, it's amazing that that's your personal history too, right? I mean, I do think to your point, like when we grow up somewhere, we take it all in as we grow up, so it doesn't seem. But I mean, that's a really extraordinary and horrible, experience for that town. And it's like what we did in the Bakken too, right? I mean, this is what we do. We find natural resources. Big companies come in and rape the land and then leave it, and then whoever is left sort of has to clean up the mess. And that is, but the thing I love about the way you did this in Blood Sisters is that we learn, I mean, yes, we learn so much about Indigenous people, about the land that is sort of, that they're bumped off one land and put on another land, and then that sort of stolen from them as well. In addition to sort of the missing women, but it's all done in the sort of in the way that I love to learn, which is that I am flipping the pages like for the story, because I'm rooting for Sid. I want to find her sister. I love the complexity with her parents. Like, it's not, she and her mother have a very, complicated, stressful relationship, and and her dad as well, and her cousins. It's a huge community of people, and really, I'm learning about all this stuff in a way that feels like it's like the Killers of the Flower Moon, which is also, and that's much more nonfiction, but it's told in this way that you get to sort of just like enjoy this incredible story. And at the same time, you recognize that there is some really bad stuff that has happened that is actually that is truth. And I love that. I love it. It doesn't feel like a 101 on issues or Indigenous people, because I think this is, for those of us who love to read stories, love to tell stories, getting the truth that way is so much more powerful, for I think, than encouraging somebody to read a long article about it, right? Because we
Absolutely.
become invested in the character, and that is why we're vested in her story. And I think that's really, really powerful.
And that's why we're so lucky to kind of be in the thriller, mystery, suspense space, because social justice and issues of justice naturally fall here, right? I mean, you're talking usually about life and death. And that's where you see the systems that are in place, right? When your child is stolen, when your loved one is murdered, when those terrible things happen, you look around and you see the structures that are in place to either help or hurt you. And then you have to think about what you have to do within those systems. And and at the end of the day, our job is to keep the pages turning. So it's like a delicate dance, but it's one I love, because
Yeah.
as a reader, I'm just like you. I love learning things, but in a way that allows me to still enjoy the story and sort of figure out where I want to go. And that's, for me, with Blood Sisters, I hope that people, whatever they're interested in, they can just they can Google it and it'll be true. I mean, there's even a big thread on like meth in the book. Not
Yeah.
only meth has like ravaged so many communities, but
Yep.
actually meth in 2008 in Oklahoma was changing. And so like all
Yeah.
of the kind of research around that, and how laws within Oklahoma to try to stop meth production basically ran out mom and pop meth and brought in Mexico big meth.
Yeah.
And transition is in the book because it was really happening at the time. It's just, there's so much plot in real life
Yes. Yeah.
that it almost
Truth
makes
is,
our job easy in some
yeah,
way.
truth is stranger than fiction. It's so true. I mean, so I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you, because you're so sort of tapped in and these issues are so important to you, as they should be important to all of us, right? Anytime people are being subjugated and taken advantage of, and then also, of course, like murdered. um what is it like, what do you think, what is the one thing or few things you'd like us to sort of think about in how we can be involved and help these communities, the women that go missing? Like, what is there a solution, Vanessa? I mean, obviously, us all being more aware is helpful, but what else do we, what else can we do? What do we need to know?
I mean, I think a big thing is just kind of learning about your community, because we're all on native land. So there are communities everywhere. And I think learning which communities you're a part of and you're near is a great step. And then linking up to them in some ways. I mean, to maybe you just go to, like a cultural event or a lecture about, whatever, like there's the Narragansett tribe here in Rhode Island, they have their cranberry Thanksgiving, and I went to a really cool like workshop talking about storytelling, and they do different kind of basket weaving. There's the craft is really interesting too. So there's like those elements that I think
Yeah.
are enriching and important. And then from there, as you learn more about the tribes that are still around you, then I think you can really plug into the work that's needed to support them. Because the missing and murdered crisis it's a really big issue, and elevating the messages is really important. And thanks to social media, people can share information quickly. So again, if you're getting plugged into those networks, if someone does go missing, like you probably will see it like on your Instagram feed or your Facebook feed. I see feeds for people
Yeah.
missing mama. And so it's, that network is there. So like getting plugged into that, I think is really valuable, but it's also just valuable, I think, from the perspective of a person wanting to be connected to the place that they live.
Yeah.
And I can just promise you that that work feels really good. To have a deeper understanding and to be around people who have a relationship to the land is a blessing and a great opportunity. And I think that if we can connect to that work in any way, that it's enriching for our own lives. And also, you can support in lots of ways the different tribal communities, the work that they're doing.
Yeah. Well, and I'm in Montana, so I mean, God, it's I have such a rich history of Native Americans and in place here for sure. So
Oh,
thank
absolutely. You got to protest. They got work to do out there. There's a lot
I
going on.
I know, I know. Um, so I want to talk about your writing, your journey, because you really have had, I mean, you have had a very, I guess every writing journey is a little bumpy, but you've had a bumpier maybe than most. I don't know how that's true or not, but you've really had a nice um, shift in your writing career. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of how you started and where you are now?
Yeah. So I basically in my early 20s, I realized that I missed creativity and writing it very particularly. So I had sort of always had a dream as a kid who wrote all the time and then just sort of left it somewhere to pick it back up. So early 20s, I started working on a couple of different books. And it wasn't until 2019 that my debut came out. So all told, it was about 13 years of writing, querying, because the process is usually you write a book, you find an agent, and the agent sells it. So, and that process can be a really long one. For me, I knew that, I knew I was in it for the long haul, but I'm kind of glad I didn't know how long it would take, because it is a long time and it's just a lot.
Yeah.
Like you're just really putting yourself out there. And when you're putting yourself out there, there can be this mentality of like, oh, please, 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 just love me, just love my book. And that's just so common in
Yeah.
early querying days authors. Like it's
Yeah.
just it's common all the
I
way
was gonna
through.
say I
It's
still
not
feel
just early
that.
days. No, totally. I know, absolutely. So that please, please, please thing worked for me for a while. And I got an agent and she sold my first two books to Thomas and Mercer, which is a great publisher. And they have so many amazing authors. And they were so kind to me and truly, gave me literally hundreds of thousands of readers. Like I'm so grateful to them. But at the end of the day, my books just didn't sell as well as they wanted. So what happens is there's a term of run out of contract, and it's like they just didn't want any more books. So that meant that like after those years of working and thinking, oh wow, I have an agent and I have a publishing deal, like, oh, my dream is here. That didn't work out. And then my agent and I needed to part ways. So I basically was at square one,
Mhm,
um, which really was terrifying.
mhm.
But there's a phrase that, dark night of the soul, which is a phrase we know as writers, because it's like our character, it's when everything has gone wrong and they have
Yeah.
to finally realize how to move forward in the right way after doing it all wrong. Right. And you look inward. And so for me, I just sort of had to think about what wasn't working. And I found it was my mentality. It was my please, 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 that was
Yeah.
really holding me back. I was just begging and putting all this energy out that had no direction. And it just wasn't working for me. And I think I needed to realign and recalibrate. And I just did. I decided to kind of just go inward. I mean, well, I quit drinking. That was a big thing for me. I needed to like get my head right. I started
Right.
sleeping better. Like I started spending my evenings, not just Netflix and wine, which, you know, we all do what we got to do, but I started like really getting more spiritual,
Mhm.
really doing some like, it's called shadow work, which is sort of like inner child work. It's really hard and kind of awful, but you feel it's like a great big workout, but you feel better after. And I, you know, worked on that. And part of that work was just changing my mentality, which is like, I need to find a business partner, not me begging for an agent to tell me I'm worth it. Right. I don't need validation in that way. I need someone who views me as a business partner and agrees with this vision I had, because I had this vision for this series of books, you know, and believes in me and my books. And we can have the kind of relationship that I want to see, where I'm, you know, not nervous and full of anxiety and just all the things I
Yeah,
sort
like
of had.
every time you talk, right? Like, I mean, there's this sense that the agent did you a favor by taking you on early days, and so then you feel like you hesitate to reach out, you hesitate to act, like you don't want to be asking too much, or and that is a really it's an unfortunate power dynamic that isn't very useful.
No, and it really gets you off on the wrong foot, because I think in this business, we just have to have a clear point of view, and that's it. And it's like, people will like it, people will not like it. That's not really your business. Your business is to know exactly what you want to communicate, find people who help you get it there, do your best to connect with people who want to talk to you in a nice way, right? Like
Yeah,
readers who are excited about your work, and you know, and it's so okay that some readers aren't, but the point is more like, you're not there to make everyone love you. This isn't about you. It's really a work. It's something you've created. And then when you do it, it's out in the world and it's not even yours anymore. And so I was really like 180 degrees away from that when I started this business. And so when I went into wanting representation for Blood Sisters, that was my view. And I really just reached out to people. I didn't query a million people as my anxiety would normally lead me to. I really sat down and thought about who could be right for me, who would be a good business partner. I, you know, wrote an email that was business oriented, you know, and found an agent, actually, Jamie Carr at the book group, who's incredible. But I found her because there's a writer, Angeline Booley, who wrote The Firekeeper's Daughter, which is a beautiful Indigenous YA. It was like a huge bestseller. And I love that book. And I thought, okay, what I want to align with are books like this, right? I want to find out who her agent is, and I'm going to query her agent, because like, this is the direction I want to go. And I didn't know at the time that the book group was an incredible agency. I really just knew that I loved this work. And so when I reached out to Angeline's agent, she was, you know, swamped, whatever. And she was like, but let me hand her over to a colleague, because I think this is great. So it just came in the spirit of me not being like, oh, please, anyone love me. It was like, no, I love this book. I think
yeah,
it could be a good fit for me. And that was like, you know, and so the same as when we went out to find an editor, you know, Jamie had a great plan, and it was just all about connection and just finding a person who was right for me. And I just knew in my heart that it wasn't about, oh, I want this publisher or that publisher. It was like, no, I want a feeling. I want a business partnership. I want a person who sees my view. It's not about me finding someone who, you know, necessarily just loves my book and like the validation that way, if that makes sense. It was much more about finding someone who felt really aligned with where I wanted to go. So that was just so different than how I did it the first time around.
and then you had, I mean, the book went to auction. Tell, I mean, we almost
Yeah.
never get to hear about that, so can you just tell people what that means?
Yeah. So it ended up being that there were, I believe, 5 different editors who were interested in it. And so which is incredible. And
Incredible.
um, I was able to chat with each of them. They all had wonderful visions for what they wanted to do. They tell you, I kind of see it this way, maybe this pub date, maybe, I told them I wanted to do a series. I wanted to make sure they were open to that. And you just kind of get a sense of each other. And actually the day we went to auction, this is kind of a funny story, but the way auctions run is, so my editor, you just do a single bid. They just like put a number in of what they're willing to pay for it. And so there was a timeline on it, which was noon. And so my agent was like, okay, like when the bids come in, I'm going to forward them to you. And then we're going to talk about them. And then, when noon rolls around, like we'll chat and figure out what you want to do. Well,
I remember this. Yeah.
I think I was
Okay.
texting you. That's
We
why you're
were all texting. Yes,
yeah.
totally.
So it's like 10 a.m. I'm like trying to be cool. Again, like I'm in this, like trying to be in this positive zone, like bring in the good things, have the feelings about how I want to feel. It's like 10, it's 11, nothing, not a peep. And of course it's like, oh my God, no one's going to bid on this thing. Like I've talked to these editors and it's over, but I really I went on a walk. I actually went to one of my favorite stores and pictured like, okay, I wanted to buy a ring for myself. What ring do I want to buy once, to celebrate what I'm going to feel like when I sell this book, right? Like just trying to stay in that energy of and sure enough, what happened was all of the bids did come in and they came in 5 minutes before noon.
You're like, this is so cruel. Right.
Yeah, it was crazy. So
that is crazy.
But it was,
I remember that day. So exciting.
It was really fun. But it was just a good sign for me that like this was kind of the energy that is best to move forward in. And like I talk to friends all the time about that because I do it too, but I hear it a lot. I was just talking to a friend, she's like, do you think this is okay to send to my editor? And I was just like, that's not it. Like the energy is, this is what matters to me. We are in a business relationship. This is what I'm pushing for. You know what I mean? Like there's just a difference.
Yeah.
And I think as creative people, we put our heart on the page and that just makes us so vulnerable, but we almost just have to be like, all right, I got to put my business hat on now. And now I'm an advocate for myself. And now I'm going to push forward what I believe in a kind, collaborative way.
Right.
But not a please, please, please way, right? Like that's a different energy.
I am still, I feel like I plug into this from you all the time and I'm still like, please, so this is all part of kind of like manifesting, which, Vanessa has been generous enough to sort of help me understand. And also the spirituality, which I have really picked up. I started because of you, and, crystals and tarot and, like you said, energy into the universe and what do I want and where am I going and what's the big picture. Talk a little bit about if somebody was to sort of understand manifesting, and I mean, you sort of talk about it in terms of like how we're supposed to, the energy that we put out into the universe. But if somebody was going to start trying to change the way that they look at their position, what would you what sort of what would you offer them?
Yeah, so I think so manifestation, it does mean a lot of things to different people. For me, I think it's an emotional direction. It's not necessarily a new car. It's like asking another question, like, what is it about that new car that I want in my life? What feeling is associated? Oh, well, it's actually about like safety. It's actually about feeling good when I'm driving, which there's nothing wrong with wanting to feel good. It's about how much I love leather seats when they're warm. Like feelings, emotions, so that you're not like, it has to be a red convertible, right? Like that's a little, in my view, it might be that, but I think manifesting is much more about knowing why your heart is pulled towards something. And one way that I learned that about myself, which we've just been talking about in text the past few days, are manifestation boards. And what I love to do, just because I actually love collaging, I have since I was a kid, but you just throughout the year, when you have a magazine that comes through your house, just flip through it. And if something like pulls at your heart, like, ooh, oh, just cut it out and put it in a folder. And then at the end of the year, pull out the things and sort of see what's still calling to you. And you can get like a poster board or you can get a journal, whatever you want to do. and just sort of put the things on there and like think about why you would want to bring them into your life. You can journal about it. But I think for me, I mean, we are all energy, and we don't even understand what energy is. Like they just recently had this study of kind of like far, far, far out in the galaxy. And the statistic was something like, we don't see or understand like 99% of the energy and atmosphere around us. And to me, that says that there is opportunity to be more aligned on paths that will get us to where we want to go. And I, you know, probably can't really clearly articulate why that is, but I just know that I feel it. And that when I am in a place of like being positive and being open and being receptive and not trying to control everything or anxiety ride everything,
Right.
that more things do come in.
Yeah.
And it's also just an exercise of taking time to like ask yourself questions like,
Yeah.
wait, why do I really want this? Because that was a big thing for me. It's like, wait, why am I so obsessed with certain goalposts? Why am I so obsessed with certain things? Right? Like, is this really like what's in my heart or in my gut? Or is this outside me? Like
Mm-hmm.
ego,
Mm-hmm.
right? Ego, is this actually
External validation. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly? Or I saw
Exactly.
someone else had it. Now I
Yes.
want it, which is
Right.
just that it's like, that's not aligned, right? Like someone else's path does not have to be your path, and it
No.
isn't your path. And
Mm-mm.
so for me, manifestation is a way of sort of grounding myself too and being like, okay, like let's really talk about what matters to you and why you actually want something, and
Yeah.
making sure that it's for reasons that are really aligned with the work that I want to do and not my ego or me
Yeah.
looking at someone else's page.
Right, right, and being like, "Look what they have, why can't I have that?" That and
Mhm.
it's so healthy, and it makes so much sense, and I think it comes from such a place where it also comes from sort of a richness philosophy, right? That it isn't like you win or I win. It's like we can all win, and I love that about it because you're such a wonderful connector to, of creatives, of, people who love this, who love books and the business, and so that is, and spirituality leaders, and tell everybody a little bit about your incredible Rhode Island place, because I know you've been doing, are you still doing retreats there? And it's magical.
Yeah, a little bit. It's kind of ongoing. So, my husband and I bought a place in South County, Rhode Island, which is just in the woods. Um, it's made with a lot of like timber. There's a post and beam style architecture. There's Asian influences in the architecture. The place itself just has a really calming energy. And so we've done some writing retreats out there, um, like breathwork sessions, tarot sessions. It's a beautiful space for like yoga, different things. And so where that came through, and that was another thing I've been sort of trying to manifest for years, is like just wanting the feeling of having a space where people could kind of come and connect to other people. And
Yeah.
maybe it's a writing retreat, maybe it's a painting retreat. I've actually been talking to people about developing reader retreats where it's just people who like to read and want to like hang out and have good meals. And maybe
Mm,
you discuss one book while you're there, maybe not. But the point is like, and certainly spiritual elements. I actually was
mhm.
just talking to some indigenous business owners about maybe doing like a cool like native women connector group out there. Anyway, so but I needed the space, and
Yeah.
we were really lucky to be able to just do this. And um yeah, so it's just a place that people can come and go. And I love energetically having a space to be like, oh, just come stay with me, bring friends. Like
Yes.
that's the energy. Like, let's have a great meal, let's talk, let's connect, like let's be in the woods.
Yeah. I mean, I got to go there last October. In fact, my sister joined me with a writers group with you, and it was really magical. In fact, I think about it all the time. I'm like, when can I get back?
You're
Montana is
always
so dang
welcome.
far from the East Coast, it feels like sometimes. But I want to talk about, so this manifestation, you just recently, like in the last week, had some pretty amazing write up in.
Yes, the New York Times.
That was on
So
your board.
that was on my board. Yeah. You know, we get the New York Times, like the book review, Sunday book review. It's just, if you don't get the print, it's just this separate section that comes every week. And They are great about usually having a mystery column, I think once a month. And then sometimes they'll do features and things like that on mysteries and thrillers, but we're in there for sure, but not always a lot. So like every time I would get the paper, I would just think, oh, something like this, right? Like how cool would it be if I could hold a book review and it was in there? And you just don't ever know. And I had it on my, manifestation board to just kind of think about it, not hold too tight, but just let it be out there. And so sure enough, Blood Sisters was reviewed by Sarah Wyman in the New York Times in her column. And so it was really cool. I got to actually hold it in my hand. And it was great.
The beautiful write-up. I mean, it's true. I mean, like, I think even from the very beginning of every writer's career, that is the sort of like, that is the highest, especially like you said, because genre writers aren't generally very, we're not as well presented, or, we're not in there nearly as much. So that was unbelievable and so wonderful. So it's all coming together. You have to feel so wonderful. They did such a great job on this gorgeous cover.
Oh, thank you. Let me see if I
And
have
you
a
have the
photo. Yeah.
hardcover.
Yes.
And I
You
love
can
how they
tell
sort
they
of
went a little like it's a little
bluer. I
Mhm.
know. I can't wait for my
You're
I can't
finished,
wait
yeah.
for my finished copy. But
That.
so tell us, like, now, I mean, obviously there's no rest for the weary. What are you working on? Can you tell us a little bit about your current project?
Yeah, so it's a sequel, and Sid Walker is back in Rhode Island. She's it's gonna mostly be related to Narragansett land, and I think land issues. I've written a first draft. It needs a lot of work.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I really I'm so interested in, there's just such a difference between me, Cherokee, Oklahoma. My family has only been on that land, for just a couple hundred years, versus the Narragansett tribal community here have been here, as they say, from time immemorial, which is like probably, I mean, I personally believe archaeology is an interesting field. It's a field that is very narrow in perspective and Western and doesn't always acknowledge how long people have actually been here. But
Mhm.
tens of thousands of years minimum, could be hundreds of thousands of years. It just depends on
Yeah.
who's digging. But the point is that, like, there's just such a difference in my view of when you've been in a place and you've, you know, done ceremony generation after generation, the dances, the medicines, the places have all been walked by your ancestors, just generation after generation. And they have a story that dates all the way back to the Pilgrims, right? Like this is one of the first places that was colonized. And so there's just a lot to learn, I think, from that. And so it's been a real pleasure, dipping into that world. I've been lucky to make some friends within the community and,
Yes.
continue to be engaged there. So, I'm excited about the project. I love writing about a place that I live and learning
Mhm.
about it and researching it. So I'm very excited to share it once it finally comes together.
Well, and yeah, because this is, I mean, Blood Sisters is the first time you've really left Rhode Island in your writing, and it's fun that you're going to come back because I know how much you love where you live, and it is such a beautiful spot. So that's really exciting. Well, I have to say, I mean, you have to get this is coming out Halloween. Go get your copy. It was literally, today is the 26th of October when you are listening to this, so you've got a few days to order it or get it at your bookstore so that you have it in your hot hands on Halloween. A perfect thing to do if you don't have to go trick or treating with young children.
Yeah, no joke.
So, which we've done, we know all about that. So, Vanessa, tell listeners where to find you. I know you're active on some social media platforms and a website, that kind of stuff.
Yes, please. I'm always on Instagram. It's Vanessa Lillie. My last name is Lillie. I'm also on Facebook, Vanessa Lillie Author. I have a newsletter that goes out maybe once every month or every 6 weeks, and you can sign up for it on VanessaLillie.com. And I'm going to try to put some kind of historical TikToks together, maybe a little more in November, but I am playing around with that platform a little bit. So if you're on TikTok, follow me. I'm not as active there as I am on Instagram, but I do want to get more active because I know there's just so many great communities on there.
There is lots of good book talk stuff too. And what's your handle on TikTok?
Oh, I think it's maybe Vanessa Lillie Writes. I guess I better figure that out. I think that's right.
Well, if you search Vanessa Lillie, and if you spell Lily Lillie as it's spelled, then you will find. I bet we'll find you.
Yes.
Okay, and like I said, Vanessa and I met. Let's see, VoucherCon. Was it? It was before Dallas, wasn't it?
No,
Maybe it was.
I think we met at Thriller Fest in 2018.
Oh, that's right. Because Little Voices was out, and you had that your phone case had okay, I totally remember. That's totally true. So yes, I love
It's
it.
like my blood sister's phone case.
She's now showing, she had Little Voices on her phone case. Now she's got a beautiful one for Blood Sisters. I love that. But yes, that is exactly where we met. And we've just become really good friends, and I'm so excited for you. I'm so proud of you for just keeping your eye on your goal. And it's just, the book turned out beautifully. So congratulations. And everybody, I know you'll love this. So go grab Blood Sisters. And thank you so much for joining us today. We will see you
Thank
next
you
time on
guys.
Killer Women.
Yes, it was my pleasure. I'm so happy to see you and chat with you. This is great. I love this community you're building. It's awesome.
I know, women thriller authors, there's no better group, and thriller readers, which is, what we all love, of course. So thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. Bye.